2 years ago when I selected Sloan, I didn't expect the AI trend to be such a boon that it is today. And coming to Sloan, my tuition dollars have actually gone further. This is the staple school to be at, given AI's rise. And we've had AI leaders from Koto, from Capital One, from NVIDIA, and they're like, we want to talk to the MBA students. We want to talk to the undergrads. We want to talk to the professors. How can you help us connect those dots? And so the curriculum has been important, as have the professors, in helping me feel ready to take on the world post MBA. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Terrell. It's a pleasure. I remember being exactly in these shoes 2 years ago, looking at the Sloan program, trying to figure out, is this my home? And more importantly, how do I actually move forward with this process? So, before Sloan, I worked at Citi in the corporate strategy and partnerships position, covering payments, wealth, lending, and it was a big role in terms of getting to see what the C-suite looks like in financial services. And I think from there, my goal was, hey, let's go to B school. Specifically, I want to go to a school where fintech is king, and more importantly, we've got that intersection of financial services, tech, and just really cool people, right? During my time here, it's been really amazing. I've had the pleasure of hosting Admit Day with the admissions team here, being a leader in Sloan Senate, representing career development, acting as a FinTech Club president and conference lead, and then being a key chair in the Asian American Alliance. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm coming to the tail end of my 2 years. And I actually was telling Terrell, just got my full-time offer to join Plaid in New York, leading FinTech and crypto partnerships.
Awesome. Congratulations on that again. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen to kind of make it a little bit more intimate in terms of our conversation. So you briefly touched on your attraction to MIT Sloan as you're looking for different fintech options. So could you further elaborate on like what led you to MIT Sloan specifically and what was attractive about our program to you?
Yeah, great question. So, for me specifically, I was researching which schools had the biggest intersection of one, faculty members that led in fintech, key students in club organizations, and then location purposes, right? Being here in Cambridge has been amazing. So, first is the curriculum, right? We have such a robust curriculum. Fintech Ventures taught by Rhodes Croft, consumer finance and fintech taught by Professor Parker. Just a key curriculum that helps you stay ingrained. The student Our students are really focused. I always like to flex, not to compare it, but our fintech community is 5 to 10x what is across the river from us. And that's largely because the students here are so technology focused. We have a lot of AI curriculum that we'll talk about later, but I think that shapes how the FinTech Club and conference comes together. And there's just enough students interested in wanting to build. And finally, the community, right? We're not in New York, we're not in the Bay Area, but Boston is the perfect intersect. Where there's actually a really strong community here, and it's easy to pull in alumni, engagement, and support across this ecosystem. And so for me, MIT kind of was that clear solution for me
Mm,
in terms of meeting all those opportunities, but also giving me the flexibility, and I always say
mm,
this, to jump in, take on leadership where I want, find mentors that will help me get in that
mm.
direction, and find and reach out to alumni who will be those mentors to support me across the journey.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Alex. And it's been kind of rewarding for me to be able to see your full journey as a prospect to, a current student here. And now you're going off to, doing great things as an alum. So definitely looking forward to remaining engaged with you. I want to touch on something as your attraction to the FinTech Club. A lot of students here may be interested in that avenue and being able to get involved with the FinTech Club. So can you share like the process of getting involved with the club and how early could it start?
Yeah. So that's a great question. For some of my students here who hopefully, got admitted, I'll be seeing you guys at Admit Day. I'll be running the FinTech Club panel after the event. So students can come and talk to prospective clubs and get involved early. And that's where I first got involved. During my Admit Day in February of 24, I came down after the reception and I met the leaders of the FinTech Club. And from there, they were able to point me in the direction of the first years who are becoming second years and taking on that leadership position. And I was able to get my foot in the door and start sharing where I could add value, right? I think one thing that becomes very apparent throughout the MIT application is there's a lot of talk of what do we get out of it as an individual, but I think a bigger part is what can you contribute, right? And I think that was one area I valued was I think I could contribute to the fintech community. I could add in my network, my expertise, and more importantly, my enthusiasm, right? And I think across those lenses, as a first year, I was able to really help build out the conference, bring in many of my key speakers. And my success across that is what tapped me to lead the conference this year. I'm excited to say that we had a very successful 10th annual conference, over 500 plus attendees, 40 confirmed speakers, and key sponsorships from Synchrony Ventures, as well as great speakers across firms, whether that was American Express, McKinsey, Brex, Capital One, Plaid, et cetera.
Awesome. Alex, you touched on the conference. I'm definitely going to talk about that as well because the conference was not too long ago.
Correct.
So, could you kind of walk us through the leadership aspect of the conference and how those thoughts and ideas come together as a group and then ultimately come to materialize through that particular conference?
Yeah. So I always say this, the conference is what makes Sloan special. I don't think there's a school that has as many conferences, as a wide range of conferences, and most importantly, in such depth. And I'm excited to say that the FinTech conference has been going on for 10 years now. This was our 10th annual, and last year's was such a success. So I think me and my co-conference organizer, Leon Herden, we felt a lot of pressure actually to
Mhm.
live up to what we did last year. And it was such an amazing process. I would say we started actually as early as August, just starting to reach out to people, using the Sloan alumni community and the broader MIT community to gain the sense of who'd be interested in speaking and who'd be a good representation. A little cliche, but our overall theme was AI and innovation. And then we had great topics across like payments, lending, wealth, and we had 40 confirmed speakers come. We raised we raised over $50,000 from confirmed sponsors across Synchrony, Propel, White and Case, and one of our biggest sponsors, Silicon Valley Bank. And then across those lenses, we were able to bring 500 plus attendees across the US to Cambridge on a snowy February.
Mhm.
And it was an amazing event. And I think what really was the key pillar for me was being able to showcase to the MIT community what fintech represented to me and to the broad student body. And most importantly, my goal was simple. How do I help my first years get jobs? How do I help me get jobs? And how do I
Mhm.
help other students who are interested really hone in and learn about what fintech is?
Awesome. And you touched on this several times now in terms of the AI transformation that's happening here at MIT Sloan. And could you touch on some of the classes that address how AI is transforming fintech and, particularly examples that you may have already participated in?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. One of the key classes I've really enjoyed is Global Business of AI and Robotics. It's taught by Nobel laureate Simon Johnson, right? I think you guys really focus on him and as deserved. I was really excited to get into the class and get to see him in action. But then also Eric So, who's a finance professor who really articulates how he's been using AI across his research. And this class has been so amazing, just the way it's shaped across the fall semester. So much has changed, right, with AI from 2 years ago to today. And I think the curriculum has really shaped the way we think about how AI is going to come, and more importantly, right, how we think about our role as MBA students in shaping this, not only in the curriculum and after. And I think the best part was been deep diving into what changes we should expect, right? We researched how we could use OpenClaw to actually create like our final projects of one of my key friends is a VC scout. How could he automate the process of, reviewing, creating research documents and deciding which startups to invest in, right? And I think those dissections were probably one of the best parts. And I always say this, 2 years ago when I selected Sloan, I didn't expect the AI trend to be such a boon that it is today. And coming to Sloan, my tuition dollars have actually gone further since being out here at MIT has been is this is the staple school to be at, given AI's rise. And many of the key speakers that we've had AI leaders from Koto, from Capital One, from NVIDIA, and they're like, we want to talk to the MBA students, we want to talk to the undergrads, we want to talk to the professors. How can you help us connect those dots. And so the curriculum has been important, as have the professors, in helping me feel ready to take on the world post MBA.
Gotcha. And Alex, I know we briefly talked before this session started about your recent travels as it pertains to the Sloan intensive period and then the spring break that just you all just came back from. So could you kind of shed some light on the action learning aspect of the
Yeah.
program and some of the action learning labs you've taken part in?
Yeah, so the one of the key highlights for me these past couple of months has been action learning labs, and I've taken two of them. I
Mm,
did MENA Lab, which goes to the Middle East, and ASEAN Lab, which goes to Southeast Asia. And so in MENA Lab, I went to Morocco and Egypt and actually worked with a private equity shop in Cairo, helping them expand their pharmaceutical business. And that was so enlightening into just getting to partner and getting to engage with a business in Egypt, getting to see how real estate was transformed in Cairo, and then give them a whole breakdown in terms of how they could use AI in financial services. And that was
mm,
a really engaging process just because it's my first time in Africa, first time honestly seeing what that area of the world looked like, and just getting to connect one-on-one with key leaders in that industry. And then most recently, I was in ASEAN Lab. So I went to Singapore, Thailand, and I worked with MIT has a whole facility in Singapore. It's called SMART. It's a
mm,
partnership between MIT and the Singapore government to do key innovation. And I stepped really outside of my comfort zone here, and
mm,
I worked on a biotech project
mm,
helping to scale reagents that help do cancer research. And so that was a fantastic experience. And then last week, I was actually in Thailand just with other Sloanies, just getting to see the sites before coming back. So, in summary, through those two action learning labs, I got to travel to four different countries, work on two different projects, and most
mm,
importantly, engage with locals in the region. And I cannot attest how important that is in really understanding what the experience is. It's one thing to travel, it's
mm.
another thing to really hone in and sit and learn from people who are living this every day.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of goes to the model here in terms of mind and hand. So being able to apply what you're learning within the classroom space and be able to put it in practice within real world environments is something that's really cool. I kind of have a follow-up question about that, as Alex, as somebody that works in admissions, we do get a lot of questions about the funding aspect for the Action
Mm.
Learning Lab. So can you kind of give them more insight on like how the Action Learning Lab and how the different offices help you in terms of that particular endeavor?
Oh yeah. So that's been a wonderful part of this process, right?
Mm,
And I'll be transparent on it, right? I think one of the hardest things for me as I engage
mm,
with travel here at Sloan has been the cost factor, right?
mm,
And Action Learning Lab makes it so easy, right? So for example, my trip, I'm going to talk about ASEAN Lab because that was more recent.
mm,
My flights to and from Singapore and Thailand were covered by MIT. And obviously, right, there was recent, changes in the Middle East that changed my flight schedule. MIT was fully accommodating, gave us additional budget to rebook and make sure we could travel safely. And then I think in terms of lodging, MIT covered my hotels in Singapore for the full week, and that gave us enough extra budget, so I was able to pay for Thailand. And it was an amazing experience
mm,
just because I was able to learn, travel, and
mm.
experience the city all without having to worry and think about what the cost considerations would be.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that transparency because we often get that question a lot about, people wanting to be able to explore while they're in business school, but not truly understanding the process. So thank you for sharing that with us and understanding that there's not just, the international aspect, but there's also some domestic action on that you can take part in as well that Sloan does cover as well. So thank you for sharing. So Alex, I want to transition back into the FinTech Club and specifically talk about ways that it shaped your trajectory, whether it's professionally or academically. You've touched on some classes you've taken, as well as some post MBA opportunities you have based in the fintech space as well. But can you share more about how the club has helped you in that particular pathway?
Yeah, so that's a great segue I love to think about. And people ask me, right, Alex, you were in fintech before business school at Citi. What really has MIT given you that was net new?
Mm,
And for me, it's truly been the platform has allowed me to not only connect with students, but also alumni and pretty much any industry that I've wanted to reach out to, right? So from the student perspective, I really only seen the US perspective, right? I,
mm,
I was born in Boston, grew up in St. Louis, worked in New York. I haven't really seen outside of it. And I think one of the coolest parts in the fintech club is I'm like one of the only key leaders that only speaks English, right? The rest of my team speaks Spanish. They're from Latin America, or they speak different Asian languages because they're working in the Philippines and Singapore,
Mhm.
etc. And so that's been a really cool experience. I like to say that I've almost become used to hearing Spanish mid-meeting, them being like, "Oh, Alex is here. Like, we got to transition back to English." And so I didn't know much about what fintech in Brazil looked like, right? I
Mhm.
think that's been one of the coolest components is really getting to spread my wings and learn about what that entails. And for example, we had the head of PayPal Ventures come in, and he was telling us
Mhm.
about how he was taking key payments innovations in Brazil and taking them into South Africa, taking them into Australia, and that's really widened my mindset into what the world looks like across payments, but also made things smaller. Um, Alumni have been so crucial, right? I've really been able to leverage and connect with Sloanies who graduated 5, 10, 15 years ago, and have been willing to give back and support the conference. And then also I've been able to use the MIT name to pretty much reach out to anyone, right?
Mhm.
I've been able to reach out to, people who weren't necessarily MIT alums, but just doing cool stuff and
Mhm.
being able to say, "Hey, I'm Alex. I'm an MIT student. I'm leading the conference. Do you have 15, 20 minutes to chat?" And 9 out of 10 times it's a yes, right? And I think through that process, you're able to really learn and connect the dots in ways that I was just never able to before Slow.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I want to continue along the lines of your engagement with the club. And you talked about the large scale conferences that you all have hosted. This is the 10th annual that you mentioned. But are there any additional past initiatives or smaller projects that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so I think there's three key ones. The first is like fireside chats. The second is focused events on recruiting, and the third is our partnership with HBS. So first is we've had 4 or 5 fireside chats, and I think these are some of my favorites. I've mentioned we had the head of PayPal Ventures. We have also had key leaders from BCG, from Silicon Valley Bank, and these key leaders come in to talk about what they're working on in fintech. And these are lunch and learns, right? During Sloan, from right now actually 11:30 to 1 p.m. Folks have lunch. Folks can join in on different sessions. And in particular, I've enjoyed leading these, lunch and learns, and it gives students the opportunity to engage in a more casual way. And many times these leaders really share insights that you just don't get in the classroom, right? During the day, you're with, academics, but now in the middle, you're able to really learn from people driving change across the world. And then secondly, as I mentioned, is recruiting events. I think it's really helpful to have our second years talk to first years and talk to the rest of the community about what navigating fintech recruiting looks like, right? I think it's largely one where, you're using on-campus resources. We have great roles with Capital One, with Visa, with other, larger fintechs, but also more niche ones, right? With like startups in the Boston, New York, SF area. How do we navigate that? How do we leverage the conference alumni network? And then a bigger partnership that I've been very proud of is we have a really good relationship with the HBS FinTech Clubbing Conference, club, and they don't have a conference, and so we're a much bigger, ecosystem, and so we've been able to leverage them to market our events, co-host networking events, and more importantly, it enables us to cast a wider net and help each other, explore the fintech community together.
So, Alex, we have a few more questions there before we transition to the open Q&A aspect. One thing I do get questions about from the admission side is the interaction or integration with the larger, well, with MIT as a whole. So, could you share about how Sloan students interested in fintech collaborate with the rest of MIT or with other programs within the MIT Sloan?
Yeah. That's a great question and one that, going into this conversation, I like thought more broadly about what has been the key connection. And as I looked at putting together a conference, some of the key pillars that have come together was actually from the engineering school, right? So we were able to partner first with MIT CSAIL, which is, I think, like the broader like AI engineering ecosystem. And as I mentioned, Koto, for example, wanted to talk to undergrads leading AI innovation, and MIT CSAIL was a big sponsor that helped us make that happen. Secondly, the Martin Trust Center has been helpful in terms of connecting us with entrepreneurs. one of the key events we organized was the startup competition, where we gave out $25,000 in awards, and the Martin Trust Center helped us advertise and bring in startups and founders across the Cambridge community. And then third is the rest of the MBA students, right? Non-MBA students, but in the curriculum. So
Mhm.
MFINs have been a big help as well as Sloan Fellows in terms of bringing differing experiences, right? We have many MFINs who are more in the investing side, many
Mhm.
Sloan Fellows who bring more years of experience who are able to bring that experience and that we can leverage across the conference. And so while, it's titled MIT Sloan Fintech, we've truly been able to represent the broader MIT community by partnering not only with students, but the ecosystem and the professors as a whole.
Awesome. Alex, I had a follow-up question there as well, because we also get this in admissions about potential classes that you've taken maybe with non-Sloan students that you
Yeah.
found really fascinating and seeing them in that particular space with you.
Yeah. So my favorite fintech class has been Fintech Ventures, right? This is taught by Professor Rhodes Kronth, and it's a collaboration across Boston, right? So we have students from Wellesley, from HBS, from Babson also
Mhm.
involved. And as I mentioned, Sloan Fellows, MFINs, I think we also have like executive MBAs as well. And the goal of this class is simple. You form teams of 3 or 4. Over the course of the semester, you build and establish a fintech startup, and at the end you pitch it to VCs, and there's a winner. I was not a winner, but
Mhm.
it was a really cool experience getting to see the wide range of ideas, being able to collaborate with students across the ecosystem,
Mhm.
and more importantly, you felt the pressure that you needed to deliver at the end. And that
Mhm.
meant that over the course of the semester, students continued to integrate and revise their ideas. And the feedback was really cool, right? Because we'd have all sorts of perspectives in the room. We'd have someone who built fintech, in Ukraine. We'd have undergrads doing investment banking at Harvard, and we'd have, student leaders from Wellesley who are trying to do financial inclusion. So you get such a wide range of perspectives that actually helped a lot to drive innovation in the class and
Mhm.
give us a unique perspective and escape the MIT bubble. So I think all in all, that class really helped shape my vision and helped me know I wanted to deep dive further into this.
Awesome. So, Alex, I have a few more questions. It looks like we have a few questions coming up in Q&A. So I wanted to kind of touch on this before we, got to that. So, for individuals who are interested in the intersection of finance, analytics, and entrepreneurship, how do students use the FinTech Club and the broader MIT ecosystem to turn those interests into real projects or internships or full-time job opportunities?
Mm, that's a great question. And I always say this in this economy, right? Having the MIT name is really important to getting your foot in the door. But I think what matters more is being able to actually connect the dots, get a referral, talk to someone in leadership who's willing to fight for you. And I think one of the best parts about the conference and the club has been we've been able to connect the dots, right? So, um, when I was in Singapore, I was able to connect with an old mentor of mine
Mhm.
at Art of Finance, and he had actually hired a member of the conference team to be a chief of staff in Singapore. And these were connections that we were able to make pretty unexpectedly, right? Um, for me as well, I was able to get my full-time role through someone who led the conference 10 years ago and kicked off the conference during his time at Sloan in 2016. And these unexpected connections is really what helps you differentiate yourself in a competitive tech market. I always say this, our community is over 200 people here at MIT, and we're able to connect the dots not only inside the school with HBS, but more broadly within the MIT fintech community. And as I look now, I'm a second year leaving and passing the baton on, I'm continuing to build those relationships so that students can, get internships at some of the VCs that continue to support us, whether that's Link Ventures or Synchrony, get roles with some of the banks that have continued to fight for us, whether that's Silicon Valley Bank or Capital One, and then more broadly look at the startup ecosystem, right? I think
Mhm.
Professor Rhodes Croft and Professor Parker and VJ De Silva have been crucial and willing to act as mentors to many of the startups that have come out of our competition and have now started to rise and hopefully take on seed funding before graduation.
Awesome. Alex, I have one final question before we transition to open Q&A, and it's more so about your reflecting on your time here at Sloan. So you had a fintech experience pre-MBA. You joined the FinTech Club, led the co-led the conference, was a midday host. But what's something you wish you known before joining Sloan that you wanted to share with our audience today?
Hmm. I truly believe that it's a 2 year journey.
Mm,
And I think it's so easy, I tell first years in the beginning, like, hey, it's a long journey. Don't get hung out on one, what you don't need to figure out everything from the start.
mhm,
And, I'm closing in on the end of my 2 year journey. And I always say, I'm now still figuring out, what this entails. And over the past 2 years, what I envisioned my post MBA career in being has continued to change, has continued to evolve, and has continued to be led by the people I've met across this journey. And I think what I've been inspired by is I've tried to say yes to
mhm,
every opportunity that's come my way, and more importantly, apply and try for things that might be out of my comfort zone. And I think those changes have really opened my eyes into what I want in my life, in my career, etc. Right? Some of the craziest things has been saying yes to traveling to Egypt, doing a dance at the Asian American Alliance
mhm,
C function, speaking at Admit Day, right, to 200 accepted students and feeling that weight. But then there's also been, the difficult sides, right? Applying for internships and not getting it, applying for student leadership roles and maybe not being the finalist selected. And I think all those wins and losses tie themselves together, right? It's truly a safe space. I always say this, if you're not trying and putting yourself outside the comfort zone, I think that's, an MBA Sloan journey not done right. I think in first year, I'm proud of the way I continued to push and put myself in those situations. And in second year, I'm proud to say that like I've been able to continue to build off of that. And the people are what's made it makes it special. As a first year, I was so sad to see the second years leaving. And now as a second year, I'm sad. I'm proud that I've formed really good relationships with first years across Sloan. And now I feel the same way again. And I think that formulation is what has made Sloan special for me. And as I look back, I'm glad that I would tell myself to push yourself into uncomfortable situations, to really cast a wide net with people you engage with across, first year, second years. And then finally, don't be afraid to jump in to help with the community, right? It's been amazing. And one of the best parts has been getting to work with admissions, getting to work with SLO as a core mentor, getting to be and lead a lot of events across fintech and career. And so much of those have shaped my experience and helped me meet new people along the journey. And has there been, trials and tribulations along the way? Of course there were. But if there weren't, I would say it wouldn't have brought me to where I am today. And I think that's the bigger picture is it's so easy to see, at the end of 2 years, see the wins, see the journeys, see what's come to fruit of it. But if I were to wheel back, 2 years ago, it'd be so impossible for me to see and envision what I would be. And I think that evolution is what makes Sloan special. And the community and that being a safe place is something that you can only find here at MIT.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you for sharing that personal reflection with us and being able to kind of share the wins and losses and understanding that it's not all green grass here.
Correct.
In business school, there's going to be some losses that you occur, but it's all about how you respond to that and ultimately reaching your goal, which is to be able to graduate, but also finding something within a fit of yours as it pertains to the post MBA option. So that's actually all the questions I had. So now I want to transition to the open Q&A. We do have several questions in here that I definitely think we can touch on. The first one I have is from Timo. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing your name correctly. But does the FinTech Club discuss code at all? I understand that MIT is the best school for computer science. So, is computer science incorporated into the into the MBA program at all?
That's a great question. I would say it depends on more so like the people involved. In my case, I am non-technical. The way we've approached the fintech community here has been less so on, I think, like the hardcore code component. We have clear partnerships, right? The LGO program, for example, is engineers who get the dual degree, and they've been really helpful. But I'd also say that we have a whole technical side, right? We have non-MBA members of the MIT community that join us. And I always say this. some of the best collaborations for many of the startups have been crossing building, right? So one of the key startups that won our startup competition has technical leads from broader MIT, business leads from Sloan, and then actually like community leaders who are undergrad interns across the Boston community. So to answer that more directly, while we haven't done too much technical so far, I'd say the opportunity is there, and especially as AI has evolved, we've actually done a lot of non-code related development using AI tools. That has been a really cool part of how we've engaged and built our startups during fintech ventures.
Awesome. And then this was I guess, a follow-up question to that. Someone asked about, is there an opportunity to take technical courses or
Yeah,
learn technical skills at Sloan while building business skills simultaneously?
yeah, great question. So there's two ways to do it. The first is taking courses within the Sloan ecosystem.
Mhm.
So Analytics Edge is a key course I took where we deep dive into, coding in R, coding in Python, but then also hands-on deep learning with Rama is one of the most popular classes. And I think that's been augmented by AI, where now it's an expectation, that you use Claude, that you use other tools as you build your final project. And then many students take courses actually outside of Sloan within the MIT curriculum. And that's really where you're pushed to the next level. And I think those are all opportunities that you get as a Sloan student.
Gotcha. And this question is from Luca about someone being newer to fintech.
Yeah.
So what resources, courses, or experiences would you recommend to start building a strong foundation while it's on for someone looking to transition or pivot into this space?
Yeah. So one of my great friends from undergrad actually had no interest in fintech, and she joined the fintech club pretty much because I asked her to. And she's been learning and really engaging and understanding what fintech means for her, but also for her career interest. In her background's in healthcare. Two key ways. The first is coming to fintech events, right? As I mentioned, we had key events throughout the fall semester with key leaders across the fintech ecosystem, and that really helps you jump in, learn more. And I always say this, the experience you get talking to real leaders is so much greater than anything you can get just reading or, staying up in the news. And then secondly has been we have one of the best intro courses, in my opinion, Consumer Finance and FinTech with Professor Parker, covers so many of the intro components across payments, across lending, across wealth, across how we think about, mortgages in the ecosystem, why the financial crisis happened, going into that full breakdown, and then also what's next, right? Some of the big players like, I don't know, Ramp, Brex, Plaid, like how are they evolving? And more importantly, he brings in guest speakers across these ecosystems. And I think that's been a big part for students to get involved. And I think across that, you're able to connect the dots and see who are people who really understand this
Mhm.
ecosystem and how do I learn more or stay engaged with him or her.
Awesome. And the next question I have for you is terms of learning about upcoming trends in finance, such as the rise of electronic payment systems in
Yeah.
developing countries. So, what are some ways that the FinTech Club or Sloan in general is helping individuals learn more about that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. As I mentioned, I have quite a few, team leaders across the conference from
Mhm.
Latin America, where we've talked about, right, the rise of payments in Brazil, and really exploring what that looks like. We had, as I mentioned, the head of PayPal Ventures come in to talk about what payment systems he's evolving, looking at the rise of open banking in the US, but also neobanks in Brazil, and also how payments is evolving in India and all of those trends. And I think that's been one of the big parts of having new speakers come in, having students who've been working on these, fintech initiatives across Latin America, across Asia. And I think more broadly, right, is there's been key startups that have been built up. Like, so as I mentioned, the winner of our competition is trying to build integrated payments in India to help, Indian citizens immigrate into the US and become citizens. And a lot of these payment trends are one in which, right, we're not only learning in the classroom from alumni, but also seeing our classmates put into action.
Awesome. It looks like we have a few more questions here. I think one of these you already answered, so I'll give
Mm,
you the space to answer it again because they may not have been here. But
yeah.
what made Sloan your number one choice? over other programs you were accepted to?
Yeah, great question. So, candidly, Sloan has been my number one choice from the start. I was born in the Boston area, so the opportunity to come back here
Mm,
was just too good to pass up. But I think more specifically, I consider it in three ways. One is the class size. The class size for me has been
mm,
perfect. I think it's like roughly 450 now. It's the right size to be able to get to know everyone, but also at the same time continue to meet new people from the class above, class below and form those deep friendships. I think,
mm,
secondly, it's been one in which I kind of knew from the jump I'd be able to lead and, most importantly, take on initiatives that I'd want to. For example, the fintech clubbing community, while there's 180 to 200 members, the key leadership team is 20
mm,
people. So I was pretty confident I could come in, learn from the right people, and take on leadership.
mm,
And then finally, and one of the bigger parts is the wider MIT community, right?
mm,
As I said earlier, if you told me, in 2024, that AI would be what it is today and that MIT would be at the forefront of that, you know, I
mm,
would have probably only applied here. But now, knowing what I know now, it's such a big part of how our community is driven, how the curriculum is built, in the way that, administrators like Terrell think about the prospective students we want to bring in. And I think that all shapes to making Sloan my first choice. And as I think and reflect on it, you know, I'll never forget the day I got it. I was a round one
mm,
applicant, December 12th of 2023, I think is the
mm,
exact day I got in. And when I got the call, it was life-changing. And I can't attest to that enough. And I think for me specifically, I told my mom this, last
mm.
week when I was in Hong Kong waiting for my flight over. It's truly been the most impactful 2 years of my life so far. And I can't even imagine going back to the starting line and doing anything differently. Like I think everything is kind of planned out, the wins, the losses, the journey as it should. And I think that's what makes Sloan special. And going back, it was my first choice. And now if I were to do it again, it would still be my first choice.
Awesome to hear, Alex. And it's a full circle moment for me because I believe when you were admitted, that was actually my first time reading applications. I don't think I read your application, but it's good to see a full circle moment where somebody that you potentially interacted with in their round one within 2023 is, now graduating 2 years later. So it's really cool for me to kind of see this is like my third graduating classes I've
I
been here,
love
which
it.
is pretty cool. And then I have one final question. I'll kind of tie these two together. So as you know, Alex, we do have a deferred program. So individuals that are in undergrad may be looking to pursue the deferred option. So, what are some skills or advice you would give to somebody in undergrad that's maybe looking to pursue the deferred option, but also maybe interested in fintech, but truly not knowing where to start?
Mm. So the first question is like advice for
Yep.
deferred kids,
Deferred. Yep.
and the second is like how to explore fintech. Okay.
Mhm.
So I always knew I wanted to do MBA. I think coming out of WashU in St. Louis in 2020, I was thinking about applying to deferred, coming into the program, and ultimately I didn't due to COVID, but
Mm,
I knew it was something that was on my trajectory. And the advice I always give deferred students is, you know, you have the Sloan admission, or you know that like this is on your journey.
mm,
Be bold, do things that helps shape you so that when you come to the Sloan community, not only are you able to learn from your classmates, but you're able to give back. And being a deferred student is just such an advantage in terms of you can do something crazy. You can work on a startup, you can go to Nigeria and start something crazy. You can, stay in the US, go do something really cool and know
mm,
with full confidence that you have the Sloan opportunity coming up. And I think what makes it special is I think there's a lot of deferred kids who come on the earlier side. I applied with 4 years of working experience pretty much because I knew I needed those years to become a competitive
mm,
applicant, but I needed those years for my own soul searching and to come to MBA kind of ready to figure out what's next for me. But I
mm,
think coming earlier does have its advantages, and I think deferred helps you shape that way. I should also say that, some of the students I know that do this program the best come later. So there's no like, right or wrong way to do it. But I think if you know you want to come to MBA and you know you want to come to Sloan, it doesn't hurt to get that win in early. And, I think it helps make your post undergrad years a lot easier. I think
Mm,
secondly is as you explore fintech is in such an interesting space right now, right? It's definitely not at the pre-COVID or post-COVID highs, but it's slowly ramping back up, and it's one of those where I think some of the coolest firms succeeding in this area are actually the startups, right? And we've
mm,
seen a lot of acquisitions across this area, right? As I mentioned, Capital One acquired Brex. Um, uh, uh, Stripe just acquired Bridge, a big stablecoin company. MasterCard just acquired BNLK, I believe is what it's called. Like, there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. And I always say this, jump and go work with some of the cool people doing startups, doing work across those scenes. Especially if you have Sloan in your back pocket. It's truly one of those where world's your oyster. Do what you think is cool. And I think that's really where you're able to get your hands dirty
mm.
and truly see like what this ecosystem entails. And I think when you come to Sloan, you're able to contribute and share that network and experience with your classmates.
I think that's a great way to end our conversation for today, Alex. So I want to thank you again for being here and providing all of this wealth of knowledge and being able to talk about your experiences and as you're preparing to go on to this next step in your journey. I definitely appreciate your time here today, but also appreciate the 2 years you spent here and being able to make an impact and adding value to our community. So definitely want to thank you again for that. And we look forward to potentially engaging with you at a midday as an alum. So I know there may be some opportunity for you to kind of talk about the three-prong kind of experience. So Alex, thank you again. I want to thank everybody else for being here today, and we look forward to engaging with you throughout the remainder of the semester as well as going into the summertime.